There is a number you have probably never worked out for yourself. Not what your rent is. What your rent demands. The income you would need to be earning for the place you live in to be considered affordable. So I ran it. 8 capital cities. The median advertised rent in each one, against the average full-time wage in that state. Not a forecast, not a projection. The June quarter numbers, from Cotality and the Bureau of Statistics. I expected a handful of cities to fail. Here is what I actually found. There is no capital city in Australia where the average full-time wage covers the median advertised rent. Not Sydney. Not the cheapest capital in the country. Not one of the 8. Today on Behind the Money, what income you now need to rent in every capital city, why the most expensive city is not the hardest one to live in, and what to do when the arithmetic does not close. Before the numbers, I need to show you exactly how they are built, because 2 choices decide everything that follows, and most videos on this topic hide both. The first choice is the rent. These are advertised rents, asking prices on new listings. That is deliberately the harsh number. It is what you pay if you move house. If you are sitting in a lease you signed 2 years ago, you are paying less than this, and you are one renewal away from the number on your screen. The second choice is the threshold. 30% of gross income. It is the standard measure of rental stress in this country, and the arithmetic is simple. Weekly rent times 52 divided by 0.3. That is the income the property is asking for. Let me run Sydney. The median advertised rent in Sydney is $841 a week. Over a year, that is $43,732. For that to be 30% of what you earn, you need to be earning $145,773 before tax. To rent a median home. Not a good one, the middle one. And the average full-time worker in New South Wales earns $109,600. That is a gap of $36,000 in the one city everybody already knows is expensive. The interesting part is what happens in the 7 cities nobody warns you about. Here is the full board. Median advertised rent, every capital, June quarter. Sydney, $841 a week. Up 5.9% over the year. Perth, $784. Up 7.8%, and closing on Sydney faster than any city on this list. Brisbane, $734. Up 6.4. Darwin, $725. Up 10.1%, the fastest rent growth in the country. Canberra, $706. Up 3.2, the slowest. Adelaide, $662. Up 4.8, in the tightest rental market in Australia, a vacancy rate of 1.0%. Melbourne, $641. Up 4.9, and Hobart, $632. The cheapest capital city in Australia. Up 8.6%. Look at that list for a second, because something is missing from it. There is no cheap capital anymore. The gap between the most expensive city in the country and the cheapest is $209 a week. A decade ago you could leave Sydney and halve your rent. Now you can take about a quarter off it, and you have to move to Tasmania to do it. Nationally, the median is $705 a week, up 5.9% over the year. Across the capitals, rents have risen 41.7% in 5 years, about $217 a week added to a typical lease. Vacancy nationally sits at 1.6%. The decade average is 2.5. Now, that ranking tells you what a city charges. It does not tell you what a city costs, because a wage in Perth is not a wage in Hobart. So I resorted the same 8 cities by a different measure, the median rent as a share of what a full-time worker in that state actually earns. The 2 rankings agree on Sydney. They agree on nothing else. Sydney stays first, 39.9% of an average full-time wage, gone on rent alone. But second place is not Perth. It is Darwin, at 36.5%. Then Brisbane, 36.0%. and only then Perth, at 35.2. Perth costs $59 a week more than Darwin, and it is easier to afford. Because Western Australian wages run about $240 a week above the Northern Territories. Perth's rent boom is being absorbed by a mining wage. Darwin's is not, then the one that should change how you read every rent article you see. Hobart, the cheapest rent in Australia. On this measure it is fifth hardest, 34.2%. Melbourne rent is $9 a week more expensive than Hobart's, and it is nearly 3 percentage points easier because Tasmanian earnings are the lowest in the country. And at the bottom of the list, the easiest capital city in Australia to rent in is Canberra, 30.8%, the fifth most expensive city in the country by price, and the least demanding by income because the ACT has the highest earnings in Australia. Cheap rent is not the same thing as affordable rent. It never was. It just looks that way on a national map. Let me put the two halves together, because this is the finding. Sydney needs $146,000. Perth, $136. Brisbane, $127. Darwin, $126. Canberra, $122. Adelaide, $115. Melbourne, $111. And Hobart, the cheapest capital in the country, needs $109,500. The average Tasmanian full-time worker earns $96,000. 8 cities, 8 shortfalls. No exceptions. Now, I want to be honest about the benchmark I used, because it makes this worse not better. Average weekly ordinary time earnings. That figure is full-time only. It is adult only. It excludes overtime. And it is an average, not a median, so the high earners are dragging it up. Renters are younger than that benchmark. More of them work part-time. More of them are early in a career. The typical renter is not on the number I have been generously comparing against. Every gap I just read you is a flaw. So who is the market actually priced for? Run the same arithmetic on 2 average full-time incomes, and the whole board goes green. Sydney drops to just under 20%. Every other capital comes in under 19. That is the real finding. The median capital city rental in Australia is no longer priced for a person. It is priced for a household, for 2 full-time incomes, or for sharing. Renting alone, on 1 ordinary wage, has quietly stopped being a thing the market supports. You cannot fix a vacancy rate of 1.6% from your kitchen table. So here is what you can actually control. 3 steps. Call it the rent ceiling. Step 1. Work out your number before you open a listing site. Your gross annual income, times 0.3, divided by 52. That is your weekly ceiling. Write it down before you look at a single property, because a rental search is an auction, and an auction works by anchoring you to somebody else's number. Inspections are crowded on purpose. If you walk in without your own figure, the market will hand you one. And if that number lands well under the median for your city, that is not a personal failure. You just watched 8 cities fail the same test. Step 2. Understand that the danger is the move, not the lease. Everything I have quoted today is an advertised rent, the price of a new listing. That is the number you are exposed to at exactly one moment, when you change address. A sitting tenant's rent drifts. A moving tenant's rent resets to market, which means staying put has a dollar value, and it is usually larger than whatever you were hoping to save by moving. Before you break a lease over something fixable, price the reset. And when the renewal comes, negotiate the term. Offering a longer lease is worth real money to a landlord who does not want a vacancy, and it is the one thing you have to trade. Step 3. Stop trying to win on the rent line. Rent is now a third of an average income. You are not going to budget your way across a $13,000 gap, and that is the gap in the cheapest capital in the country. Pretending otherwise is how people end up blaming themselves for a market. The lever that moves a third of your income is the income, not the coffee. In a market priced at 35%, a pay rise is a housing strategy. 8 capital cities. 8 times the average full-time wage does not reach the median rent. Sydney is the most expensive, and it is also the hardest, but below Sydney the ranking scrambles completely. Darwin outranks Perth. Hobart, the cheapest rent in the country, outranks Melbourne. And Canberra, the 5th priciest city in Australia, is the easiest place in the country to be a renter. Know your ceiling before the market tells you what it is. Price the move, not just the rent. And stop treating a structural gap as a personal budgeting problem. If this was useful, hit like and subscribe to Behind the Money. Every week we take one number the whole country repeats and show you what is underneath it. I'll see you in the next one.